In the estimation of this writer, success is the achievement of one's chief aim in life. It may be the getting of money, or it may be the acquiring of leadership of some great cause that will benefit humanity. A crowd of troubles passed me by, as I with courage waited. Said I, where do you troubles fly, when you are thus belated? We go, they said, to those who mope, who look on life dejected, who weakly say goodbye to hope. We go where we're expected. P.S. Day. Chapter 10. Accurate Thought. The 10th billboard on the road to success is accurate thought. To achieve fame or accumulate a big fortune requires the cooperation of your fellow men. Whatever position one holds and whatever fortune one acquires must, to be permanent, be by sufferance of one's fellow men. You could no more remain in a position of honor without the goodwill of the neighborhood than you could fly to the moon. And as for holding a big fortune without the consent of your fellow men, it would be impossible, not only to hold it, but to acquire it in the first place, except by inheritance. The peaceful enjoyment of money or position surely depends upon the extent to which you attract people to you. It does not require the far-sighted philosopher to see that a man who enjoys the goodwill of all with whom he comes in contact can have anything within the gift of the people with whom he associates. The roadway, then, to fame and fortune, or either, leads straight through the hearts of one's fellow men. There may be other ways of gaining the goodwill of one's fellow men, except through the operation of the law of retaliation, but if there is, this writer has never discovered it. Through the law of retaliation, you can induce people to send back to you that which you give to them. There is no guesswork about this, no element of chance, no uncertainty. Let us see just how to go about harnessing this law, so it will work for us instead of against us. To begin with, we need not tell you that the tendency of the human heart is to strike back, returning stroke for stroke every effort, whether of cooperation or of antagonism. Antagonize a person, and as surely as 2 and 2 are 4, that person will retaliate in kind. Befriend a person or confer upon him some act of kindness, and he will also reciprocate in kind. Never mind the person who does not respond in accordance with this principle. He is merely the proverbial exception. By the law of averages, the great majority of people will quite unconsciously respond. The man who goes about with a chip on his shoulder finds a dozen people a day who take delight in knocking it off, a fact to which you can easily subscribe if you have ever tried going about with a chip on your shoulder. You need no proof that the man who carries a smile on his face and who always has a word of kindness for everyone he meets is universally liked, while the opposite type is just as generally disliked. Your thoughts are servants of your will. You are master in your own house, and you can entertain whatever guests you please. Man molds himself by his thoughts as a sculptor molds clay. Think success, and you'll be successful, if you only think it hard enough and steady enough and long enough. This law of retaliation is a powerful force which touches the whole universe, constantly attracting and repelling. You will find it in the heart of the acorn which falls to the ground and in response to the warmth of the sunlight bursts forth into a tiny sprig consisting of 2 small leaves, which finally grow and attracts to itself the necessary elements to constitute a sturdy oak tree. No one ever heard of an acorn attracting to it anything except the cells out of which an oak tree grows. No one ever saw a tree which was half oak and half poplar. The center of the acorn forms affinities only with those elements which constitute an oak tree. Every thought which finds abode in the human brain attracts elements after its kind, whether of destruction or construction, kindness or unkindness. You can no more concentrate your mind on hatred and dislike and expect a crop of the opposite brand than you could expect an acorn to develop into a poplar tree. It simply is not in harmony with the law of retaliation. No matter if the world laughs at you, take your own self seriously. The mob laughs at what it does not understand, ridicules what it cannot comprehend. Too many men, who have the fire of genius within, never let it kindle into the flame because they fear the laughter of the crowd. Forget what others think. The thing that matters is what you think of yourself, and that you believe in yourself. Throughout the universe, everything in the form of matter gravitates to certain centers of attraction. People of similar intellect and tendencies are attracted to each other. The human mind forms affinities only with other minds, which are harmonious and have similar tendencies. Therefore, the class of person which you attract to you will depend upon the tendencies of your own mind. You control those tendencies and can direct them along any line you choose, attracting to you any sort of person you wish. This is a law of nature. It is an immutable law, and it works whether we make conscious use of it or not. The person who poisons the mind with unclean thoughts commits a greater sin than does he who poisons the drinking water, because a poisoned mind reproduces itself in other minds. A brief story of the human mind. At birth, the mind is a blank, a great storage room with nothing in it but space. Through the five senses of seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, and feeling, this great storehouse is filled. The sense impressions which find their way into this storehouse before the age of 12 are apt to remain there throughout life, whether they are sound or unsound. Ideals and beliefs which are planted in the young, plastic mind of a child are apt to become a part of that child and remain with it throughout. Ideal will guide the child in its ethical conduct throughout life. It is possible to so thoroughly build character in the child's mind, before the age of 12 or 14 years, that it would be practically impossible for that child to disregard that character and go wrong in life. The mind resembles a great fertile field, in that it will produce a crop after the kind of seed sown in it, by which is meant that any idea placed in the mind and held there firmly will finally take root and grow, influencing the bodily action of the person after the nature of the idea. Also, just as wild weeds will spring up in fertile soil that is not tilled, so will destructive ideas find their way into the minds of those who have not planted their constructive ideas. The mind cannot remain idle. It is always striving to produce, and naturally enough, it works with the material which finds its way into the mind as a result of our environment, our contact with others, the sights we see, the sounds we hear, and the like. One of the most powerful principles of the mind is that known as autosuggestion, through the aid of which we can continuously plant an idea in our own mind and concentrate upon it until it actually becomes a part of us to such an extent that it will dominate our actions and direct the movement of our bodies. If you have enemies who are foolishly trying to undermine you, smile at them with tolerance and watch them tumble into the pitfalls which they dug for you. Another characteristic of the human mind is the fact that it becomes a sort of magnet or lodestone which attracts to us other people who think, believe, and act as we do. The human mind has a strong tendency to reach out and form affinities with other minds with which it is in harmony on one or more subjects. Throughout the universe, there is a law through the operation of which like attracts like. This law is seen in operation quite readily in the manner in which one mind will attract to it other minds which harmonize with it. If this is a true statement, and we know that it is, can you not see what a powerful force this law is? And can you not see what a tremendous aid it can be to you if you will cultivate and constructively use it? The human mind seeks its level just as surely as water seeks its level, and it will not be content until it finds level. We see this working out in the mind of the man of literary tastes and tendencies who seeks the companionship of similar minds, in the wealthy man who seeks companionship of the wealthy, and the poor man who seeks the company of the poor. If it were not for this law, an oak tree never could spring from the acorn, because the atoms out of which the oak tree grows never would be attracted to one center in sufficient number to build that tree. If it were not for this law, the human body never would mature, for the reason that the chemicals, food, and nourishment would never be attracted and distributed to the proper places for growth and expansion. If it were not for this law, the material out of which fingernails are built would be distributed to the roots of the hair, or to some other part of the body where not needed. This law is as immutable as the law of gravitation, which holds this earth in its course and keeps every planet of the universe in its proper place. Analyze your friends. If you are not proud of them, it is no particular credit to yourself, because you are the magnet which has attracted them. The color and tendency of your mind is the attraction which has gathered around you other minds which harmonize with your own. If you don't like those who have been attracted to you, change the magnet which attracts them and pick up another set of friends. A mighty fine way to magnetize your mind so it will attract to you the highest standard of human beings is to set up in your mind an ideal that is patterned after men whom you most admire. The modus operandi through which this is done is very simple and very effective. You can even draw on the character of sundry other people for material out of which to build, in your mind, this ideal which is to become the magnet that will attract to you those who harmonize with it. For example, take from the life of Washington those qualities which you most admired in him. From Lincoln, those qualities which you most admired in him. From Jefferson, those qualities which you most admired in him. From Emerson, those qualities which you most admired in him, and so on down the line. Out of the composite of these qualities, build an ideal. In other words, see yourself possessing all of these qualities, permitting no act or thought to pass which does not harmonize with this ideal. And the first thing you know, you'll begin to resemble this ideal, and, more important still, you will commence to attract to you others who harmonize with this ideal, either in whole or in part. Time is a perfect healer of mistakes, failures, and grievances. If you've tried and failed, wait. Time will turn the wheel of fate around to success again, if you keep faith in yourself. This is no mere theory. This writer knows that the plan works because of the only reason that anyone knows anything for sure. He has tried it himself. You place the material in your mind, and the great unseen alchemist works it into shape, building you a character and a personality which corresponds exactly to the nature of the material that you supply. You now know how to gather the material. You know how to be exactly what you want to be, and this writer will assume full responsibility for the soundness of this principle. It will work so that you, or even the most inexperienced unbeliever, can see that it works in time, ranging all the way from a few hours to a few months, depending upon the extent to which you concentrate your mind upon the task, the extent to which you see clearly the picture of the ideal or the person you are building, etc. This is autosuggestion, of which we are writing. It is the principle through which you can build yourself over, or through which you can build yourself to order. Through this principle, you can master discouragement, worry, fear, hatred, anger, lack of self-control, and the remainder of that long string of negative qualities which stand between most people and the full, happy, joyous life which is their right and heritage. These qualities are the weeds which correspond to those which spring up in the fertile soil of the fields, when those fields are not plowed, cultivated, and tilled. This is not a new brand of religion of which you are hearing. It is not a fad. It is not the outburst of an unbalanced, fanatical mind. It is a sound, scientific fact which any professor of psychology will corroborate. These are just a few of the more elementary principles of your mind, stated in words which we intend to be so simple that a schoolboy or girl can understand them. For a more detailed study of that wonderful machine you carry around in your head, go to the library, or go to some good bookstore and buy a few books on applied psychology. The only thing about you or anyone else that is really worthwhile is the mind. These old bodies that we carry around with us don't amount to much. They are merely the tools through which the mind operates anyway. They cannot move an inch until the mind directs them to do so. If you would understand yourself, first learn something about your mind. And when you have learned a great deal about your mind, you will know a great deal about all minds, because all work in exactly the same manner. Chapter 11. Concentration. The 11th billboard on the road to success is concentration. 15 years ago, this writer read Graustark by George R. McCutcheon for the first time. We began early in the evening and read all night. Next morning, we were as fresh as if we had slept. To no extent were we fatigued. Furthermore, we remember the story of Graustark so clearly that we could relate it today as well as we could have done the day after reading it. In later years, when we were studying law, we sat up many a night for a couple of hours, doing our best to keep awake while reading Greenleaf on Evidence and Blackstone's commentaries. 2 hours of that reading was about all we could stand at one sitting, and strange enough, we did not remember very much of that which we read, even until the next day. What was the difference between the two kinds of reading? The difference was just this. In the first instance, the story was told in an absorbing, interesting style, which caused the mind to become alert and to open itself to receive all that was read. In the second instance, the reading was dull and dry. The story was told in phrases which did not vibrate with life and action. Consequently, there was nothing to arouse the mind and prepare it to receive and record that which was read. The human mind might be likened to a sponge. You know that a dry sponge will not absorb water readily. It must be held under the water and given time to become saturated before it will pick up its capacity quickly. So it is with the human mind. It must be aroused, or it will not grasp the sense impressions which are coming in over the five senses of hearing, smelling, tasting, seeing, and feeling. Froebel discovered this principle when he invented the kindergarten system of teaching little children to learn by arousing their minds and intensifying their interest through play. If you want to become the leading teacher in your school, find ways and means of directing the minds of your students towards study through play. Get their minds aroused over the subject at hand, and they will master that subject in much less time, and to an extent which would not be otherwise possible. If you are the foreman, with men and women under your supervision, find ways and means of arousing their minds, of interesting them in the task at hand, of getting them to love the work they are doing, and you will become noted for the efficiency of your workers. Work out ways and means of stimulating interest through competition, allowing bonuses to the worker or workers who perform a given task in less time than another worker or group of workers. These bonuses may be in the nature of extra compensation, promotion to higher work, off time, prizes, certificate of efficiency, or anything else which seems most appropriate for the class of workers you are dealing with. Every efficient man who employs others knows that it is not a mere matter of charity, sentimentality, or idealism to give his workers a clean, cheerful environment in which to work, but it is strictly sound business judgment. Dairymen have learned that cows will give more milk when kept in clean stalls and kept free from annoyance by flies and other pests. Every doctor knows that a mother with a nursing baby at her breast cannot properly nourish the little fellow if she is in a state of worry and anxiety all the time, no matter how much food she herself may take. The human mind, when brooding over troubles, manufactures and throws into the blood the most deadly of poisons, and if this goes on long enough, it overtaxes the capacity of the purifying process of the liver, and disease of almost any kind is apt to break out in the body. Happiness, health, joy, the capacity to retain the sense impressions and to recall them at will, all have their seat or cause in the human mind. A peculiar thing about the mind is the fact that our bodily actions take on the form and color of our thoughts. Show me what a person thinks about most, and I will very accurately analyze that person's actions for you. You cannot think of misery, suffering, poverty, and disease, and be prosperous, healthy, and happy. These combinations simply do not make agreeable bedfellows. When Shakespeare wrote, "To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, that thou canst not be false to any man," he merely meant that we couldn't go wrong if we followed the promptings of our own conscience. The time is coming when every place where men and women work will be equipped with appropriate playgrounds, an apparatus with which to coax the human mind into an harmonious state every few hours. There will be periods off for play, exercise, and recuperation. Then, you will have less use for your hospitals, jails, and insane asylums. The human body, like the locomotive genius, must have attention, rest, repair, and overhauling. Where on earth will you find a piece of machinery that will stand nearly every sort of abuse and lack of attention, as long as the human body will stand it without going to pieces? May it not be possible that some of the inventive genius of the world would find it profitable to itself and extremely valuable to the human race to turn some of its effort toward the discovery of ways and means of artificially stimulating the human mind and arousing it so that it will become more alert, and so it will learn to switch from negative, destructive thoughts of worry, fear, and anxiety to positive, creative thoughts of courage, enthusiasm, and good cheer? Froebel, the inventor of the kindergarten, only scratched the surface of the possibilities which are open to the educators of the present age. It took Froebel's system nearly 100 years to gain momentum and popularity. If an educator or anyone else will take the concepts hinted at in this editorial and build them into a system through which adults, as well as children, may turn work into play, this writer will put that person on the world map in much less time. The columns of this magazine are available to every person who will invent ways and means of helping people overcome the fallacies and superstitions which have dogged the footsteps of the human race as relics of the Stone Age. Anything which will cause people to think constructive thoughts is desirable. Anything which will cause the human race to become free thinkers and throw off dogmas and creeds is desirable. Of course, the moment you throw off your dogmatic chains and quit believing a thing merely because someone else told you to believe it, you automatically kill off that crop of human parasites who, like leeches, fatten on your ignorance and superstition. These little leeches will not want to see you become a free thinker, because the moment you do so, you will quit paying them tribute. Generally speaking, any man who sets himself up as the last word of authority on a given subject is a menace to the process of the human race, a usurper of rights which the Creator probably never intended to relegate to him. Usually these chaps who set themselves up as self-styled privileged leaders, claiming the power to lead the world, or any part of it out of darkness into light, are nothing more or less than fanatics on one subject or another, and more often than otherwise, on all subjects. One thing you will do well to think about, brother, is the fact that only that which you do for yourself, only the thinking which you and the conclusions which you reach in your own mind, will be of permanent value to you. Happiness is something which you cannot buy, borrow, beg, or steal. You have to create it in your own mind, and you cannot do this until you commence to study your own mind and understand it. The best place to start studying the mind and the wonders which you can perform with yours is with the simple concepts which we have mentioned. When you see for yourself that your body can perform twice as much work, and with less fatigue, when engaged in labor which you enjoy, as it can when you are engaged in work which you dislike, you will see that here is a principle which offers great possibilities. You will see that it pays to find the work into which you can throw your whole heart and soul, work which you will like. You will see that this principle offers great possibilities to the man who employs others, because he can, through its operation, increase their efficiency and add to their enjoyment of life, their earning capacity. Less rhetoric and more results. You are constantly building your character out of the impressions you gather from your daily environment. Therefore, you can shape your character as you wish. If you would build it strongly, Surround yourself with the pictures of the great men and women you most admire. Hang mottos of positive affirmation on the walls of your room. Place the books of your favorite authors on the table where you can get to them often, and read those books with pencil in hand, marking the lines which bring you the noblest thoughts. Fill your mind with the biggest and noblest and most elevating thoughts, and soon you will begin to see your own character taking on the hue and color of this environment, which you have created for yourself. Mind, unfathomed mine. What do you know about your mind? What do you know about any other mind? An old lady had been bedridden for 12 years, unable to turn over without help. Came to that home one day a man who understood a little, but not very much perhaps, about the strength of the human mind. He gathered the old lady's relatives around him and promised to cure her if they would all arrange to leave the house and let the old lady know that she was absolutely alone. After they had all cleared out, this man slipped into the room unnoticed and set fire to the old lady's bed. With a scream and a single leap, she gathered her wraps about her and ran from that room as though nothing were wrong with her. From that day on, she remained out of bed. She was bedridden nowhere except in her own mind, the self-same place where most of us remain in poverty and failure and grief. Learn how to use that wonderful mind of yours. The human mind is a composite of many qualities and tendencies. It consists of likes and dislikes, optimism and pessimism, hatred and love, constructiveness and destructiveness, kindness and cruelty. The mind is made up of all these qualities and more. It is a blending of them all, some minds showing one of these qualities dominating, and other minds showing others dominating. The dominating qualities are largely determined by one's environment, training, associates, and particularly by one's own thoughts. Any thought held constantly in the mind, or any thought dwelt upon through concentration and brought into the conscious mind, often attracts to it those qualities of the human mind which it most resembles. A thought is like a seed planted in the ground, and that it brings back a crop after its kind, multiplies, and grows. Therefore, it is dangerous to allow the mind to hold any thought which is destructive. Such thoughts must sooner or later seek release through physical action. Through the principle of autosuggestion, that is, thoughts held in the mind and concentrated upon, any thought will soon begin to crystallize into action. If the principle of autosuggestion were generally understood and taught in the public schools, it would change the whole moral and economic standards of the world inside of 20 years. Through this principle, the human mind can rid itself of its destructive tendencies by constantly dwelling upon its constructive tendencies. The qualities of the human mind need the sunlight of nourishment to use to keep them alive. Throughout the universe, there is a law of nourishment and use, which applies to everything that lives and grows. This law has decreed that every living thing which is neither nourished nor used must die. And this applies to the qualities of the human mind which we have mentioned. The only way to develop any quality of the mind is to concentrate upon it, think about it, and use it. Evil tendencies of the mind can be blotted out by starving them to death through disuse. What would it be worth to the young plastic mind of the child to understand this principle and commence to make use of it early in life, beginning with the kindergarten? The principle of autosuggestion is one of the fundamental major laws of applied psychology. Through a proper understanding of this principle, and with the cooperation of the writers, philosophers, school teachers, and preachers, the whole tendency of the human mind can be directed toward constructive effort inside of 20 years or less. What are you going to do about it? May it not be a good plan, as far as you are concerned individually, not to wait for someone to start a movement for general education along this line, but commence now to make use of this principle for the benefit of you and yours? Your children may not be fortunate enough to receive this training in school, but there is nothing to hinder you from giving it to them in your home. You may have been unfortunate in that you never had an opportunity to study and understand the principle of autosuggestion when you were going to school. But there is nothing to hinder you from studying, understanding, and applying to your own efforts this principle from now on. You will find a complete course in applied psychology running serially in this magazine. It began with the January issue. Go back to the beginning and read this course. It is written in understandable, simple language which any layman can absorb and apply. Learn something about that wonderful machine which we call the human mind. It is your real source of power. If you ever free yourself of petty worries and financial wants, it will be through the efforts of that wonderful mind of yours. Your editor is still a young man, yet he has positive evidence in many thousands of cases of the transformation of both men and women from failure to success in remarkably short periods of time, ranging all the way from a few hours to a few months. The magazine you hold in your hands is concrete evidence of the soundness of the argument that the individual can control his economic destiny, because it is a success which was built out of 15 years of failure. You can turn your past failure into success if you will understand and intelligently apply the principles of applied psychology. You can get to wherever you wish to go in life. You can find happiness instantly once you master this principle, and you can build financial success as rapidly as you comply with the established practices and principles of economics. There is nothing that savors of occultism in the human mind. It functions in harmony with the physical and economic laws and principles. You don't need the assistance of any person on earth in the manipulation of your own mind, so it will function as you want it to. Your mind is something which you control, no matter what your station in life may be, provided always that you exercise that right instead of permitting others to do so for you. Learn something of the powers of your mind. It will free you of the curse of fear and fill you with inspiration and courage. Chapter 12. Persistence. The 12th billboard on the road of success is persistence. We have made an important discovery, a discovery which may help you, whoever you are, whatever may be your aim in life, to achieve success. It's not the touch of genius, with which some men are supposed to be gifted, which brings success. It's not good luck, pull, nor wealth. The real thing upon which most great fortunes were built, the thing which helps men and women rise to fame and high position in the world, is easily described. It is simply the habit of completing everything one begins, first having learned what to begin and what not to begin. Take inventory of yourself covering the past 2 years, let us say. And what do we discover? The chances are about 50 to 1 that we will discover that you have had many ideas, started many plans, but completed none of them. In the series of lessons on applied psychology, which are running serially in this magazine, you will find one explaining the importance of concentration, followed with simple, explicit information on exactly how to learn to concentrate. You will do well to look that particular lesson up and study it over again. Study it with a new idea in mind, that of learning how to complete all that you undertake. You have heard it stated in axiomatic phraseology ever since you were old enough to remember that procrastination is the thief of time. But because it seemed like a preachment, you paid no heed to it. That axiom is literally true. You cannot possibly succeed in any undertaking, whether it is large or small, important or otherwise, if you merely think of that which you would like to accomplish, and then sit down and wait for the thing to materialize without patient, painstaking effort. Nearly every business which stands out prominently above the common run of similar business represents concentration on a definite plan or idea from which there has been but little, if any, variance. The United Cigar Store's merchandising plan is built upon an idea, simple enough, but upon which concentrated effort has been directed. The Piggly Wiggly retail stores were built upon a definite plan, through the principle of concentration, the plan itself being simple and easy of application to other lines of business. The Rexall drugstores were built upon a plan, through the aid of concentration. The Ford automobile business is nothing more than concentration upon a simple plan, the plan being to give the public a small, serviceable car for as little money as possible, giving the buyer the advantage of quantity production. This plan has not been materially changed in the last 12 years. The great Montgomery Ward and Company and Sears Roebuck and Company mail-order houses represent two of the largest merchandising enterprises in the world, both having been built upon the simple plan of giving the buyer the advantage of quantity buying and selling, and the policy of satisfying the customer or giving him his money back. Both of these great merchandising concerns stand out as mammoth monuments to the principle of sticking to a definite plan through concentration. There are other examples of great merchandising success which were built upon the same principle, by adopting a definite plan and then sticking to it to the end. However, for every great success to which we can point as a result of this principle, we can find 1,000 failures or near failures where no such plan has been adopted. This writer was talking to a man a few hours before writing this editorial, a man who is a bright and in many ways a capable businessman, but he is not succeeding for the simple reason that he has too many half-baked ideas and follows the practice of discarding all of them before they have been fairly tested. This writer offered him a suggestion which might have been valuable to him, but he replied immediately, "Oh, I've thought of that several times, and I started to try it out once, but it didn't work." Note the words well. I started to try it out once, but it didn't work. Ah, there was where the weakness might have been discovered. He started to try it out. Listener of the Golden Rule, mark these words. It is not the man who merely starts a thing who succeeds. It is the fellow who starts and who finishes in spite of hell. Anybody can start a task. It takes the so-called genius to muster up enough courage, self-confidence, and painstaking patience to finish that which he starts. But this is not genius. It is nothing but persistence and good common sense. The man who is accredited with being a genius usually is, as Edison has often told us, nothing of the kind. He is merely a hard worker who finds a sound plan and then sticks to it. Success rarely, if ever, comes all in a bunch or in a hurry. Worthwhile achievement usually represents long and patient service. Remember the sturdy oak tree. It does not grow in a year or in 2 or even 3 years. It requires a score of years or more to produce a fair-sized oak tree. There are trees which will grow very large in a few years, but their wood is soft and porous, and they are short-lived trees. The man who decides to be a shoe salesman this year, then changes his mind and tries farming the next year, and then switches again to selling life insurance the 3rd year, is more than apt to be a failure at all 3. Whereas, had he stuck to one of these for 3 years, he might have built a very fair success. You see, I know a great deal about that which I am writing because I made this same mistake for almost 15 years. I feel that I have a perfectly good right to warn you of an evil which may beset your pathway, because I have suffered many defeats on account of that evil, and, consequently, I have learned how to recognize it in you. The 1st of January, the day for good resolutions, is nearing. Set aside that day for 2 purposes, and you will be quite likely to profit by having heard this editorial. First, adopt a chief aim for yourself for the next year at least, and preferably for the next 5 years, and write out that aim word by word. And second, determined to make the first plank in that chief aim platform, read something after this fashion. During the ensuing year, I will determine as nearly as possible those tasks which I shall have to perform from start to finish in order to succeed, and nothing under the sun shall divert my efforts from finishing every task which I begin. Nearly every man has intelligence enough to create ideas in his mind, but the trouble with most men is that those ideas never find expression in action. The finest locomotive on earth is not worth a shilling, nor will it pull a single pound of weight until the stored-up energy in the steam dome is released at the throttle. You have energy in that head of yours. Every normal human being has, but you are not releasing it at the throttle of action. You are not applying it through the principle of concentration to the tasks which, if completed, would place you on the list of those who are regarded as successes. As far as this writer can determine, the chief objection to cigarettes is the indisputable fact that they have a very decided tendency to render the human mind dopey and inactive. This is enough to condemn them, because anything which retards a man's action or the releasing of his ability through the habit of concentrating his mind upon a task until it is finished is detrimental to his welfare. Usually a man will release that flow of action which he has stored up in his head in connection with a task which he delights in performing. That is the reason why a man ought to engage in the work which he likes best. There is a way of coaxing that wonderful mind of yours to give up its energy and pour it out into action through concentration upon some useful work. Keep on searching until you find the best possible way of releasing this energy. Find the work through which you can release this energy most readily and most willingly, and you will be getting mighty near to the work in which you ought to find success. It has been this writer's privilege to interview many so-called great men who are regarded as geniuses, and as a means of encouragement to you, I want to tell you frankly that I found nothing in them which lows do not possess. They were exactly like us, with no more brains, sometimes with less. But what they had, which you and I also have, but do not always use, was the ability to release the action which is stored up in their heads and keep it concentrated upon a task, great or small, until completed. Don't expect to become as adept at concentration the first time you try. Learn first to concentrate upon the little things you do: the sharpening of a pencil, the wrapping of a package, the addressing of a letter.